What is up, Bears fans? Welcome to the Bears Huddle podcast, your UK take on all things Chicago Bears. Guys, we're going to bring you all the latest news as we enter what seems to be a bit of an injury crisis as we count down to that Monday Night Football intro against the Minnesota Vikings in that titanic NFC North clash to get the Bears NFL season underway, guys. And, we already knew that Jalen Johnson was the guy who obviously was returning from a non-football related injury, and we didn't obviously know when he's going to be back and the state of his return. But it seems at this moment in time, many Bears are dropping just basically like flies. It is pretty dire at this moment in time. And obviously, we're looking up to Monday, the 8th of September, when the season gets underway. But let's add some names to that list. Not only now are we worried about Jalen Johnson, but also obviously we've come out of training camp and my favourite bear, Kyler Gordon, the guy who got his jersey. He's obviously not much news about him returning. Then star safety Jaquan Brisker goes down. No news about him, and he's even carted off. No contact. It was a non-contact injury of some description because there was no physical contact to Brisker before he went down, before he started to walk off, but in the end needed to be carted off, which is never a good sign. Then today, obviously, Austin Booker, who had a pretty phenomenal preseason, has been added to the injured reserve list. Roschon Johnson, again, injured. Not only that, Kyle Monongai has not featured since that first preseason game as well. Running back room is looking very sparse indeed. The injuries continue to mount for the Bears. I think even Tremaine Edmonds was listed as limited as well the other day. And this is not a great start to going into the 2025 season, is it? This is not what we want to be approaching that first NFC North game, be without a number of key players. Now, look, if you look at the Jaquan Brisker situation, and you look at that depth, that safety position, yes, there is Kevin Byard there, obviously. But, if obviously Jaquan Brisker is not available to play, then we've got a situation where who do you go with? Who becomes that safety? Obviously, people have talked about Kyler Gordon possibly playing safety, but Kyler himself might be out injured. That Bears secondary will look very, very sparse and very weak against the Minnesota Vikings and Justin Jefferson. Given the fact that we could be missing Jalen Johnson, I think that's highly likely we will be for the Vikings game. We could also be missing Kyler Gordon, and we could also be missing Jaquan Brisker. You're taking out three of possible four starters there from the Bears defense. Yes, the Bears have made roster moves. Obviously, Jalen Jones came into the cornerback room, but still, I don't think he is someone who's going to trouble the starters at all. Safety, I think safety's now become a position we need to perhaps look at depending on the severity of Jaquan Brisker's injury. Kevin Byard obviously is the number one safety now with Brisker out. Now, I suppose one positive is that for Brisker, it's not a concussion injury, which is always good. But, who do you trust there? Do you trust Elijah Hicks? Do you trust Jonathan Owens to come in and do as good a job as Jaquan Brisker would have done? Certainly for me, that is a major, major concern. Now, the Bears obviously have had to make some roster moves. Now, we heard, yesterday that Jalen Jones and DeMarco Jackson, the former New Orleans Saints linebacker, were added, and that Daly, the long snapper, and Devin Duvernay were cut. And I was surprised at Devin Duvernay being cut, given the fact that he was signed during free agency. He was the main kickoff returner. He was also took a number of snaps as well at wide receiver during the preseason and did actually feature quite predominantly for the Bears in that preseason campaign. So, the situation really is, was a weird one, but now more roster moves. I think, as was mentioned the other day on Chicago Bears Central, this roster is not set in stone. This is not the final roster. I think there'll be a number of moves to make, but there is a number of positions that still need to be addressed, in my opinion. These were the roster moves that were made today. Scott Daly and Devin Duvernay re-signed onto the active roster. Austin Booker placed on the injured reserve list, which I think is a real concern and really weakens us at that defensive line position, at that edge rusher position. Also waived the following player from the active roster, linebacker Carl Jones Jr. That's how the gaps are made for Daly and Duvernay to return. Now, obviously, with Austin Booker going down injured, add that to the number of injuries we've already got on that defensive line. It does severely limit us in that position. Now, I know Tano Passanio is on the practice squad, so could well also be called up. Now, reminder, you can bring a player up from the practice squad to your 53-man roster as an extra player. You can bring 2 up actually to make 55 on your match day roster, but you can only call that player up twice in the season. Now, it may be that with Booker being out, that Tano Passanio might be called up for at least the first couple of games to the roster to cover that slot, as obviously at the moment we have only got Dayo Odeyingbo and Montez Sweat in that defensive line on that edge rusher position. You know, you look beyond those two to that edge rusher position. Austin Booker obviously is out now. He's gone. He's on the injured reserve. Dominique Robinson also went down during that Kansas City game. He is missing, which leaves only Daniel Hardy as a third option. So I think the likelihood is that Tano Passanio will be called up to the roster. But, you know, in terms of Austin Booker, for me, it's a real, you know, shame that Austin, you know, has gone out. Now, last season, obviously, Austin played all 17 games, 21 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 3 stuffs. That was pretty much it. A very limited involvement for Austin, you know, last season. But, you know, he was one of those preseason stars. And look, yeah, I get it's preseason. I get that you get preseason stars who go on to achieve absolutely screw all in the actual NFL season at start. But, you know, he had a pretty decent pretty decent preseason with 6 solo tackles, 4 sacks and 1 forced fumble. 4 sacks giving him first in preseason in the NFL, and 1 forced fumble also tying him first in the NFL as well. It's a real disappointment, you know, given the fact that Austin did look like he was really genuinely clicking into some sort of form and some sort of groove, you know, coming into this season. So for me, this is a bit of a loss, losing Austin Booker at this point, and I think this is a real setback for the Bears defense and Dennis Allen going into the season. Like I said, you know, that really does weaken that defensive end position. You know, leaving now only to be fitting up his Sweat, Odeyingbo and Hardy. You know, like I said, is it that Tano Passanio has to be called up to sort of fill that missing slot on the Bears roster? And like I said, you know, it's not only him, it's Jaquan Brisker, it's Kyler Gordon. There's a number of players now missing through injury. A real worry for me going forward for our Bears with that situation. Look, you've also got to look at the running back room. The running back room has also become a major concern. Now, I think a lot of Bears fans, if you ask them before this preseason, you know, the running back room itself would be listed as a concern. Obviously, we've got Dondre Swift, who is still fit and is going, but Roshan Johnson and Carl Manunga. Now, obviously, Ian Wheeler was released, waived. He's gone. Travis Homer, obviously, another one gone. You know, there's only 3 running backs on the roster, and at the moment, we only have 1 fit running back going into the new season. Now, Ben Johnson was asked by Courtney Cronin about the situation regarding the Bears running backs. Obviously, Carl Monangai, who played particularly well in that first preseason game, did not feature since and has missed, obviously, with injury, those games. And Roshan Johnson has also been out. No word yet on return dates for any of those players. Ben Johnson, like I said, when he was questioned by Courtney Cronin, did say there's some question mark when all these guys will be fully healthy again. We're working through that. We'll always be looking if there's guys out there that we can help upgrade that room. I think the injury part of it, that is the most troubling and concerning part right now. It's just making sure we have enough depth so that we have a full stable of guys going forward. But I have confidence that week 1, really for the whole season, we're going to be just fine there. You know, so it's... Like I said, even though there is literally no timetable for the return of Manungai and the return of Johnson, you know, there is definite confidence there from Ben Johnson that we have the right players in that running back room, and that he's got confidence in Roshan Johnson, Carl Manungai and Dondre Swift going into this season. However, like I said, there is no timetable for return. Now, Britton is, of course, the guy on the practice squad, and I think there is perhaps a strong likelihood that he will be called up to the roster again for that, for the actual opening couple of games of the season. I think, you know, there is a real chance that happens, you know, given the sparsity of resources at that position for the Bears. Now, he obviously could come in and back up D'Andre Swift, but I certainly don't think, he would be anywhere near in the same ability-wise as Roshan Johnson, or even possibly as a 7th-round pick, Carl Manungai. It really does appear to be worrying that this close to the start of the season, we're talking about injuries, that we're talking about players missing already. Not something we want to be talking about as Bears fans. Hopefully, that by the time that 8th of September rolls around, we're over a lot of these injuries. I do genuinely think that Jalen Johnson will obviously be out for those first couple of games, but I think the hope is that Kyler Gordon could be back, that hopefully the injury to Jaquan Brisker is not as serious as we first think it is, that he can be back, especially with him going into that contract year. He needs to show out this season and show that he can stay healthy and be consistent to maintain and to get himself a new Bears contract. Guys, it's a worrying time. Obviously, as well, with the news today that Micah Parsons has become a member of the NFC North, obviously being traded from the Packers, for the Cowboys to the Packers for a 2026 and a 2027 first round pick, along with defensive tackle Kenny Clark as well. It's a worrying thing to have him in the division. Obviously, he certainly upgrades that Packers defense going into the season, and certainly something that obviously will, give our newly revamped offensive line something to be concerned about. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments about this injury crisis that is currently ongoing. Thank you for watching the Bears Huddle podcast, your UK take on all things Chicago Bears. Please obviously smash that like, comment, and obviously sub to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. Remember always, bear down.